Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Moving Spotlight podcast. I feel like I've used exciting a lot.
Yeah, you love that
welcome
word.
to another Wunderbar episode.
Ooh.
Well, yeah, look at that. Of the Moving Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, John Ruby. This is my main man.
Corbin Coyle. Hey, everyone.
Hello, we are here. It's exciting. It's a beautiful, sunny Southern California day. Corbin, I want to talk about something you've done either for an audition. What's the wildest thing you've done either for an audition or to get ready for a part or even when you're doing a part? Like, is there anything like crazy where you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Yeah, I mean, audition, yeah, there are plenty, but like recently I was just in a short that was, I had to slam my head into the wall. So like, and luckily the wall was like, it was a stage, so it was pretty hollow, but the director came in and he was like, so I want you to do this, throw this, do this, and then bam, hit your head. And he did it. And I was like, well, now I have to do it. I too am a man. Like, it's like I just had to like actually go for it. And so when the first time I did it, I was a little worried, but it really wasn't that bad because it was pretty hollow. But the first moment, I was like, I have no idea. I'm about to get bruised and then be my face on camera.
Yeah.
So that was pretty wild.
Yeah. And later on, was there any bruising or did you survive it all
It was
right?
a little tender. It hurt a little bit, but no bruising otherwise. No makeup needed.
There's a great documentary called American Movie, and it's about these guys from Wisconsin trying to make a horror movie. And it reminds me of a scene from that. These guys, they're doing it really low budge, and the movie's really hilarious. It's by Chris Smith, who's a great documentarian. And one of the parts they try to do, Corbin, is they try to put a guy's head through like a cupboard door, but they try doing it a couple times, and one guy's shoving the other guy, and it's like bam, bam, and then they check, and like they put the slightest cut on the back of the door. Like that door is never
moving.
gonna break. Yeah, it was not gonna move, and it is one of the funniest, worst scenes in a movie. I was just thinking about, I did a film and I had to do my German accent, which was very fun.
Yeah.
But then I also had to walk with a limp.
Oh.
And then I also had to act with a dog. So there was a lot happening.
So it was easy. Yeah, right.
And it was so simple. There was so many varying factors in it, you know? Luckily it was a sci-fi movie, so kind of anything
goes. Yeah.
But that was kind of a wild experience.
Wow. How was working with the dog? Was the dog just all over the map or was it pretty well trained?
The dog actually wasn't bad. The dog kind of sat on the table. I had to put almost like headphones on a dog, which was really funny, which was wild. But the dog was pretty good. Yeah. And actually, this reminds me of just one more other story, which was I worked on a commercial for Honda. This was a while ago. And I had to do a scene with a fox. They made me a woodsman. They gave me a fake beard. And I had to work with a real fox in this apartment. Whoa. And the foxes are little, dude. They look like little cats. Like, really? They're not that big. At least this one wasn't. Mm-hmm. No, they're not that big. At least this fox wasn't. Maybe it was the runt. It was there. And I asked the trainer, I go like, how trainable are foxes, right? You know, like the fox was sitting on a table. He's like, he had this little metal stick. He's like, well, as long as I've got the stick with a little bit of meat on it and I'm holding it like in front of the fox, it's good. As soon as the fox gets the food, it could go anywhere. No way. So I swear to God. And I had to walk by the fox at the table. That was part of the bit. So the trainer's like under the table with the thing. And then right before the take, he'd like give him the food. And they'd be like, all right, John, action. Walk by this like wild fox. No, the fox would sit up there, but it just was like the threat or the thought that like the fox, once
the
it
most
had its
improv
treat,
you've ever had to do.
was get by the fox, but it was a very well trained fox. But I was like, I wish I wouldn't have known that because I was thinking in my head
Like,
it was
come
much
up.
better. Yeah, I was walking like real stiff. So anyways, that was my experience, and you had a fun one too. I love that you did that.
Yeah.
I want to talk to someone who also has a lot of experience in front and behind the camera. Mm-hmm. She is an actor, coach, and casting professional. Ava Himmel, welcome to the show. Hello, Ava.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks, guys.
Any thoughts on the craziness you've either had to do or instruct people to do?
Yeah, when you were talking about the fox, I had a commercial a couple of years ago where, and it's actually still airing, where I had to work with a real spider.
Ooh, no.
And
I'm out.
Right. And that was the thing, is like, they told me before the audition, they were like, just so you know, like there's going to be a real spider on set. Like, are you okay with this? And I made the joke of like, as long as the spider sag. But everyone was like terrified for me. Like even on set, all the like the crew and like everybody were like, are you okay? Okay, we're bringing up the spider.
Yeah.
No problem. Like that, for whatever reason, not an issue. No.
Wow.
Not an issue for you, or just because the spider was so well behaved? Like, I mean, is it a well behaved
Like,
spider? I'm interested.
It was a big spider. Like it was, yeah, it was probably about that big. And it had to crawl up my leg. So they had to like keep putting it on my leg, and then it would crawl towards me, and I'm supposed to act scared. No, for whatever reason, that one didn't bother me. I'm like, there's a lot of things like Corbin, like, no, I'm out.
This.
Like, just, and I'm not a big spider fan, but like, there was just that thing in me that was just like, I got this. I totally got this. And I think also because everyone was scared, I was like more of like,
I don't think phobia is the right word, but like I have a healthy respect for spiders where I'm like, I don't want to deal with it at all. Like I also don't want to kill them. So like I'll trap them and do that dance with the cup and the thing, like I hate that because I'm like, don't move. But I couldn't do that.
I'm like that too. I'm like, I don't want to kill it because then I have to deal with the corpse afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm the same way. I'm just like this. But yeah, like that was like that experience made me feel like really like proud of being like having to do those kinds of things where I was like, I've worked with this spider.
that's
and they come by and they like put him back in his little cup and then like put him on your leg again. So but
is it on your resume now? Just skills, spiders. That's nice.
Spider wrangler, spider antler.
Not afraid of spiders.
Not afraid of spiders.
That's great.
Cockroaches though, I'm out.
Just any bug I don't want to deal with.
Oh, house centipedes. Blah.
Oh god.
Oh my god. All those legs. Too many legs.
The legs. I don't like the legs.
Yeah.
So Ava, we've known each other a long time in the sense that like we've been in the casting circles like for so long. And I guess I'm actually curious. I don't know if we ever talked about it. How did you get your start? Like kind of what is your casting lineage?
Story?
Yeah, your origin story. Yeah.
Well,
like Marvel. We're like Marvel superheroes. My parents were killed. No, that's not even funny.
That's how it started.
Oh God, Ava, no, please. No.
Well, I started in Toronto, and I guess it kind of started. I was an actor, and I was taking. I took like a class, like a one-day class with two casting directors, one who was like heavily pregnant, and she asked me to come in as a reader for her for short films, and she was really impressed with sort of how I handled all of that. And then she needed someone after she had her baby to sort of sit in for some sessions when she couldn't be there and give notes or like take notes for her. And then she basically hired me and said, I can't pay you a lot, but I can train you. And I can basically introduce you to all the casting directors in Toronto and get you in that way. So I took her up on it, and I learned so much about sort of the casting process and the behind the scenes of sort of being a casting assistant. And then from there, a casting director needed lobby assistance. I knew what to do. I sort of jumped in and found that I just was miserable. I just didn't enjoy sort of being outside. I wanted to be in the room all the time. Mm-hmm. So I started making friends with the guys, and it was always guys who ran the cameras and ran the sessions. And I kind of kept pushing them, asking them to train me, and they did. And I loved it so much. I loved sort of learning the technical side of the camera and how all of that worked, and everything in Canada was about 10 years behind here. So it was all like using the DVD machines and like ripping, footage at the end of the day. And just, there was so much more sort of technical stuff that was within our control and our responsibility. So I learned all of that. I learned how to direct the actors and everything. So I'd been doing that for probably about 3 years before I moved to LA. And then it was sort of like, well, that's what I was doing there. Let's see if I can do it in LA. And I just knocked on every studio door in the city. And I think being a woman was a little bit of a novelty at first. So they gave me a shot, and then I was actually good at it. So then they kept hiring me. But that was just kind of it. It was a hustle and a grind, and just kept pursuing it. And I genuinely love it. Like I genuinely never had to sort of like get up in the morning and be like, oh, I got to go to work. Like I loved being able to be in that room every day. That was my job, talking with actors and working with them and creating these stories. So.
Do you remember who the first or second casting director you ran sessions for when you were knocking on doors?
In LA? Yeah. It was Arlene at ASG.
Oh,
she was she was the first one, and she just happened to be in the office like in that moment. And I walked in, And I just remember that like kind of like looking at me as I was talking to Justin, and Arlene was just kind of like looking at me and was like, yeah, we'll train you on LA casting and we'll give you a go. And yeah, they were the first ones to take a chance on this young Canadian kid.
That's awesome. I love Arlene and Justin. They're great. That's great.
You touched on something that I think somewhat like skated past that I thought was really cool. Your ability, it seems like, to just like, what is the mindset that you put yourself in to be able to think about, oh, I want to do this, and I'm going to start putting myself in the position to be able to do it. Like you were kind of saying, like, oh, I was trying to make friends with these people. Like, what is that skill set that you've kind of tapped into that?
I think it's honestly just, I'm not happy where I am, but I know where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I get there? And I think sometimes the hardest thing is figuring out where you want to be.
Yeah.
But then once you kind of know that looks like more what I'm looking for, it's sort of figuring out, okay, now what are the steps? My mom always calls it housekeeping. It's like the hardest part is figuring out what you want. Then once you know what you want, it's just housekeeping. It's just figuring out the tasks you need to get there.
Because then you're just jumping on those lily pads to get to the place you need.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay, I need to know that person. Okay, how do I get to know that person? Well, maybe I need to do this over here first, and then I have to go over there. And that's kind of my philosophy with everything, really.
Amazing.
I just saw something that was talking about how just different things in life are hard, like work is hard and this is hard and this is hard. That is like, what hard life do you want to choose, right? So do you want to choose? And I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, it is kind of true. Like, life is there are moments where it's not, but it's just life can be hard. And so it's like, what are you picking to follow and pursue, that you can kind of be active with. So when you got down here and you started doing that, Ava, did you find that, because I think sometimes it's something that's interesting is like getting the opportunity, but then sticking around are like two different things. So sometimes people come in and they disappear and then sticking. So how did you kind of like, when did you know you were over that hurdle, or when did you know you were kind of in the loop of things, or how did you kind of navigate that?
It's funny because I think it was probably years before I realized that I was like in, and I think it was probably like one day, like a session director, like introducing me to someone, whether it was a casting director or something, and being like, oh, Ava is this really amazing, I think he said something like, Ava is like one of the best session directors in the city. And like everyone loves her. She works for everyone or something. And it was sort of like, it hit me of like, wait, I am? Wait, people know who I am? And because up until then, it was just sort of like nose down, just having to hustle. When I first moved to LA, I knew 3 people and none of them super well. And I like moved into an apartment that I was sharing with this guy that I met through like an acquaintance. And I just remember he was out for the night. And I was just sitting on the couch looking at the television being like, if I died right now, like no one would know, like no one would care. No one knows that I'm here. Like just that feeling of like, I'm at the bottom, like I haven't connected with anyone. No one knows me. And so I think for the first few years, it was just like every day, get up, like keep hustling, keep pushing, keep meeting people, keep like, taking opportunities, whatever they are, and just keep going. And so I think it was like probably 4 or 5 years, 4 years, let's say, in that I was like, oh, people know who I am. Wait, what's cool? I can take the foot off the gas just a little bit. Wow.
Yeah, because I think that's so interesting because a lot of times people ask me about like, hey, I want to work in casting. How do I do it? And, everybody's path is a little bit different, but usually it helps if you know somebody or they're like, hey, but it's one of those things where you can get an opportunity if you stick with it, but then holding on to that opportunity is a different thing. And I've found that too with people who, I'm ready. And then, they show up, whatever, they show up late or they're not as prepared, or when they get on the camera, they're not as comfortable with the camera as they thought. And then they realize, oh, it's also a time thing and I'm doing the computer and I'm direct, and it's like kind of overwhelming. And you have to be able to kind of deal with all those pressures. But then they're like, yeah, maybe casting's not for me, even though I think it's it's an amazing opportunity. Do you ever have people hit you up and say, I want to learn about casting, I want to be a session director? Yes.
Yeah, all the time. And what I've tended to say now is, because it's usually actors, and it's like, oh, I really want to get into session directing, and like, how do I do it? And I always say it's a hustle, just like acting. So it's like it's its own business. So if you're hustling in acting and you want to put that same kind of effort into session directing, great. But if you don't, if you're just looking at it for it to be a way into acting, probably not for you. Not saying that it doesn't do that. Like, it definitely does help your acting, because it makes you, you see so many auditions, it makes you a better actor. It does help you meet people and make connections, but it is its own grind. And like, you're hustling for casting directors, for clients, always having to be available, always doing that. And then you're right. I always think, because I've been doing it for so long, like, oh, it's really easy. You just do this, 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 and that. But there's so many elements of things that you're doing at the same time. The camera, you're filming someone, sometimes you're doing like panning, moving from one person to another, doing sound effects on the computer at the same time that you're also reading with them off camera. And then as soon as you call cut, you have to have been watching it with the eye to give a direction, a redirect of some sort. Mm-hmm. And like, that's a lot of balls that you're, kind of throwing up in the air at the same time. And having to do that time after time after time after time. That's not everyone's skill set. So I think it is definitely one of those things of like understanding that it's its own journey, and great if you want to do it. It's not for everyone.
And I think also what I realized is when I would like, oh, bring this person in, they'd be great, and then maybe sometimes they were good, sometimes they weren't. The referrals reflect on you, right? And I think that's something you learn really quickly. And that's I tell my students this. It's like, so you're more hesitant to referral. Not that you won't still do it, but at least I am, because I learned that like I bring someone in, they say they're ready, they're not really ready, and then the casting director looks at me like, John, you got to clean up this mess. And so you become, you really want to see the person who's really wants it, and so that which can take some time. You said, it took 4 or 5 years till you felt like you're in, but like, that's the other thing is like, then it's like reflecting on you, and you're like, well, I'm freelancing here too, in a sense, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's true of like people who are wanting to do session running, but I think it's also true of actors. Like, all of us, director, producers, casting directors, session runners, actors, we're all in this business building relationships, and everything is based on your relationship. And so it's the same thing. You can't refer someone just because you like them if they're not going to be able to sort of hold their own, or, and not just always talent wise, sometimes just in their responsibilities. Are they going to flake? Are they going to do that kind of stuff? So it does become a little bit of a, like, I like you, I want to refer you, I want you to do well, but there has to be that understanding of like, my name is on the line. Even if just to like bring people in to audition, like, I need to know what level they're at, so that I know that there's certain things I can definitely like be like, let's just bring them in, let's just give them a go. They need more experience. And then there's other things where it's like, this person's a booker. You bring them in, they're going to like do really, really well for you. So it's understanding on our part where people's experience levels lie, but it's also on the person asking for that referral to understand like what's on the line for other people.
Now, John, you mentioned before, it's like, as soon as you started taking all your jobs more seriously, it started opening up more doors too. And I think it's kind of in the same world where it's like, if you start doing your casting director or session directing job, like, people are going to start to notice, and they're going to be like, oh, this person's a hard worker, and they're going to continue to be hard workers as actors too.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always true, but this idea of like, sometimes, the way you approach one thing is the way you approach everything. And I think there's a certain energy about that. And, I feel like a lot of casting directors I've worked, they all are wonderful, but also a little bit neurotic in their own ways. Mm-hmm. And I remember, Ava, maybe you have an experience like this. One of the first casting directors I worked for was like on the slate, which is, for people that don't know, it's like where you get their name and maybe, some other information. But this person like only wanted a little bit of room above their head. Like, and I wasn't used to that. I was like kind of a big shot, and I never even saw it. And, and they were like, just a little bit above their head on the screen. Well, that person was so like focused kind of over my shoulder. That was a lot of times when the casting was like in the room with you, that then I just applied that into the future. And it always like, but the point was like, you had to like kind of get on board with kind of being really specific, which I think also ties in with what you're talking about as actors, and get really detailed. for who you're working for, but also just for the project. And that was an interesting thing for me when I like more like big picture and looser. I was like, okay, this is important to them. I got to make it important to me.
I think one of the things I learned is here, a lot of casting directors get a niche. They get known for certain types of commercials. Like, oh, this casting director, all of the commercials that he casts, it's always very dry. Like the humor is very dry. Everything is very small. You don't go big. Some casting directors, like they do a lot of fashion and a lot of beauty stuff. So, that like you start to learn that. And so as a session director, you start to, like you were saying, like you start to learn their sometimes neurotic things, sometimes just their preferences. And you start to be very specific to what they need and what they want. And then I think that also translates then, I hope, for actors to start to learn that casting directors have their own little things, so that when you go in for one casting director, or you start to know that's like, oh, this is the kind of style I'm going to need for them. This is what I'm going to need over here. And that it's not a blanket across the board. You do need to kind of start to kind of fine tune those radio waves for each person.
Yeah. What their kind of taste is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Corbin.
With so many, like, as we're saying, you're juggling so many things at all times. You're juggling personalities, juggling camera movement, all this stuff. Are there things that you have a preference, or like that you've taken away from the room for actors to like, what puts you at ease when you're being a session director that goes like, oh, okay, so this isn't a confident actor who knows what they're doing. They're going to be in and out. Like what is the first thing they do when they walk in, to like the acting to when they leave?
God, we session directors, we love that question, but it's so unfulfilled often.
Yeah.
No, it can't be fulfilled. Go ahead, Ava. Yeah.
I honestly, what I say to actors all the time is the most important thing you can do as an actor coming into audition is to listen and use common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like 100% across the board. That's so much of the game, is just coming in and being present and just actually like listening. The amount of times when I do like a group direction where I'm bringing all of the actors in to the room, I'm standing there and I'm walking them through what they're going to do. And I always say there's like a third of the room that is like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever, I get it, let's move on. I just want to act, and they're not really listening to what I'm telling them. There's a third of the room that's like so intent that they're like, oh my God, I have to take this all in, I have to listen, and they're just like trying so hard that they don't end up hearing anything I say. And then there's that like middle third that is just there.
Mm-hmm.
They listened, they heard it, they asked a question if something didn't make sense, they took it in, and then when it was their turn to audition, they just did. They just did what I asked.
Mm-hmm.
And that at the end of the day is everything. Like so many times I find like newer actors, they're so nervous and they want to do so well. Like they really do. And they end up just trying almost too hard. Like they think that they need to do more to be seen. But actually at the end of the day, the people who book are the people who just come in and just are, and they just do.
Yeah. There's an ease there. I've also found, Ava, that sometimes with newer actors, what can happen is like, and this happens a lot of times after they do a take, and then I'll say, okay, like here's some of the redirects. I can see in their eyes when their cup gets full. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I give them, okay, this note, and they're like, and then this note, and then the third note, it's like, now it's gone. They've already forgot the first note. And that's one thing that like, I think it happens with experience, but also when you're a little more relaxed, is like you take in those notes and then you make those adjustments. And I think that's an interesting thing of like keeping in mind is a lot of times sometimes we keep the first take, but sometimes we're like, now we can move around takes. So it's like, even if you're just really good at like starting at a good level, you've listened, and then we're helping you as much as we can get to that next level, and we've seen 40 people already do it usually. So we've seen what's working and what's not working.
Yeah. I know for me, like I personally, I try and make it an environment where we're playing, that you come in, because especially with commercials, like unless you're doing like dialogue to camera, like super, super heavy spot, you've got like a line or two, maybe, sometimes not even. So you shouldn't be too stressed out. You should come in and just be like, this is the environment we're creating. These are our characters. This is the idea of the spot. This is the turn or whatever. Let's just play. Let's just have some fun. And I try to create that environment for people. And the good actors, the seasoned actors that have been around for a while, they know to come in with that energy. It makes it flexible. It makes it fun. We're not curing cancer. We're just having fun. We're just playing. We're just doing. And I love when people come in with that energy, because then I can play off of that. I can see what you're doing and being like, oh, it would be really good. What if you add this on at the end? Or what if you do this? Or like, and it then becomes less of me giving directions or redirects, and it becomes more of a collaboration and us making like your performance the best it can be. And I do also find that I try really hard to explain it, redirects and directions, in a way that sort of makes sense to the fuller picture. Like, I hate the just go faster, make it bigger, very kind of bland, without an understanding of why. I always think, in my opinion anyway, it's so much easier to make those adjustments if you have an idea of what the bigger concept is and why you have to make that adjustment. So, that's the kind of stuff that I like to try and bring to the room to try and help.
Yeah, and I think there's something where, especially with commercials, it's like very specific what we want you to do in the room a lot of times. Like, that's what we've worked out. And I think sometimes actors feel a little like, not caged, but they're like, oh, I got this own thing I want to do. And like, there's usually a reason why it's kind of, too far out there, or it doesn't work. But then there also is something with the improv that we like to see, which I want to get to kind of next, which is improv is really, really important in commercial auditions. But I do think there's something interesting where it's like, to be able to fulfill what's in that sandbox and play in that sandbox that's set up is so important. Wouldn't you say, Ava?
Yeah, 100%. I think the really interesting thing about commercials, and I honestly love commercials. Like, I really don't do any like film and TV and stuff anymore, because I just find I have such a passion for commercials. But the thing I love about them is that they are these 30-second stories, or 15 seconds. And sometimes today it's like 5-second stories. So you have to be so economical with your time. And so you have to be able to tell this story, understand who the characters are, have the turn, have the funny joke, whatever it is, in such a short amount of time. We don't have time for you to really find anything. And in the audition, we give you more time than you would have when you're on set, because when you're on set, it's like, we need to see that look really fast. We need to have you deliver those lines in, you did it in 17 seconds. We need it to come down to 13 seconds. So there's time for the ad stuff at the end. Like, there's such an economy to what we're trying to do that, it has to be very prescribed. It has to have already been figured out of like, you have to do this and do that. And you have to play within those rules. And if you can't show us the funny moment, or you can't show us the relationship, and you can't do that within those 10 seconds, you need 45, it's not going to read on camera. It's not going to work.
Do you have a source or something that people can like study commercials, like, or like a way for people to, because it's so hard. Like, I mean, obviously commercials are all around us all the time, but is there like stuff that you like to recommend for people to really focus on it?
Well, I watch commercials. Like, the amount of times I hear people who are like, oh, I pay extra on Hulu so I don't have to watch the commercials. I'm like, really? That's how I make my money. Like, if I'm at the bar watching a baseball game, it's like, I could care less about the baseball game, but as soon as the commercials come on, I'm like, oh, that's who they went with. Oh, I worked on that. Like, the more you're watching them, the more you're looking at like what the tone is, what the, different characters, how they sort of follow kind of similar patterns, or there's trends that go through camera work, and just looking at how fast they are. And I just think there's so much just within watching, like watch. And then when you're on set, like, I find paying attention to, I love to meet people, and I love to talk to people, and like, have fun with the other actors, but there's also so much to learn by just like being on set and watching how the director is with the ad agency, and how they are with the actors, and how the rest of the crew works, and how it all comes together. And the more you kind of see that process, understanding what's required of you so that you come in and you sort of can deliver right away. So to me, watching is so important. I mean, obviously
Ava,
taking classes and doing all that stuff too, but watching.
I remember I was on a commercial set and it was a lot of dialogue between me and another guy. And the director was doing close-ups on the other guy first. And he was really like, just like let it roll, and was kind of like, okay, pause here, don't pause here, do this, do that. And it was like a intense workout. Like he was just, the other actor was like, Jesus. And the other actor was experienced. And then they were turning the camera on me. And I remember kind of overhearing like the AD say, okay, we've got 15 minutes until lunch. Mm-hmm. And so being around, I said, okay, I'm going to get worked in the same way. They're going to use that whole time for 15 minutes. So prepare yourself. Mm-hmm. So, it was an interesting thing just to kind of see that happen. And then it was the same thing where it's like, okay, pause wherever you want. I pause. Oh, why'd you pause there? Do this. It was like, Jesus. So, but he was like getting slammed, but you like had to prepare yourself and be ready.
Yeah.
And I think with what you're talking about, I think that's a great point, is like, trying to be as prepared as you can, and then whatever it throws at you, whether that's on set or, before an audition or a callback even, that is, so important.
Yeah. I always feel like you need to be as prepared as you can, but then you also have to be able to throw that away.
Yep.
And like, just trust that it's in there. You've done your work.
Yeah.
And now you just have to be in the moment.
Well, people sometimes say, oh, I've over-rehearsed it. And what's interesting, what I kind of like to say is, you haven't over-rehearsed it, in my opinion. You've set it in concrete. So you can't change it. That is the difference. Rehearsing a lot is fine. We rehearse a lot for plays and things like that. That's fine. But the problem is when you set it in concrete and then you get a new direction and you're like, I can still only do it this way. I can't get out of this.
You can see the frying happening around their brain of like, no, I've done it this way. And I know how to do it now.
Yeah. This is the way I know. This is how I learned. Yeah.
That's my thing with buttons. And I know like different people have different opinions on whether you should practice buttons, whether you should have buttons prepared before you go into the room. Yeah. And some people say no. I actually say yes, but with the caveat, because I think you should start thinking about it because it primes the pump and it gets your creative juices flowing, but you have to be willing to never have them be heard and to like find something new in the moment, because the worst thing you can do is have a button that you've prepared outside the room and you're like, oh, this is going to kill. And then you come in there and you deliver it and it just falls flat because it's not genuine to the moment that got created. It was genuine to a moment that was in your head earlier. So I do think it's good to prepare. It's like what you're saying, John, like it's good to have those thoughts going and the juices flowing and creativity, all that kind of stuff, but then be prepared to do something new.
And I always have people, when I'm coaching them, like go a little bit early and then like write them out, like grab the, like write it, like have some, you can get them out of your head if you want. I mean, some people that can load them up, but it's kind of nice. Then you've got those options. I love that. Yeah. Getting the pump primed. So I am obviously a master improviser. Corbin is a beginner. His brain gets overloaded. Like that's just obviously to everyone listening to this show.
Everyone knows John Ruby is a master improviser.
John, master improviser Ruby. Let's talk about improv for a bit. I know you come from, I did my research too, Second City. So you're obviously a big fan of comedy and stuff like that. I just want to know your kind of history with improv, and then we can get into it with commercials and stuff, because I think it is really important. I just want to hear a little bit about you with that.
Yeah, I started more as like a classically trained actor, like drama and, that kind of stuff. And then I decided to take a class at Second City and really kind of fell in love with it and just started kind of moving through the ranks and conservatory and like, just going into that world. And that became my whole world for a while in Toronto, and really fell in love with sort of the process of dissecting comedy and figuring out the game of the scene and like really kind of figuring out that world. One thing I discovered though was that you could have the most brilliant comedic actors and like Second City alum that had like written a ton of reviews, directed and comedy reviews and written great sketches, but they didn't know how to necessarily translate that to commercials. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I found really interesting, especially once I moved to LA, was really finding a way to bring, to figure out the different types of improv, and that like improv in the sketch world or just, short form, long form, that kind of world is different than using improv in film and television, and that you need them, but they're different. You use your brain differently and you exercise in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the application of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my thing, is like, I did it in Toronto, and I loved it, and I loved that world. And I realized like I'm much more interested in making people laugh and being funny and being silly with people than trying to make them cry.
Mm.
What's your your favorite role you've ever played? That's like I'm assuming it was a comedy.
Oh gosh. I don't know that if it's my favorite, but it was just one that just the first thing that popped in my head is I had this very small part in that TV show Great News with Tina Fey's show. And I was a Swedish reporter, and it was just like, it was a bunch of us. There was like a ventriloquist, a Swedish reporter, like a child. It was like they were auditioning like a bunch of new news anchors or something. And I had to have a Swedish accent and just be just very, and I just remember the audition itself just being hilarious, because it was like they let me keep going with my improv, and I just like had to start saying like weird things. It's just hamburger, and just saying things that would come out of my mouth, like as this girl who's like too afraid she doesn't know any more English words. And apparently it was good enough that they thought I was actually Swedish when I got to set.
Oh,
and
wow.
they were like, "Do you know any like real Swedish words? Like, can we just get you to improvise some Swedish words?" I was like, "No, sorry, I'm Canadian. I don't know anything."
That's really funny. It's kind of a meeting of two things. And what I'm thinking, Ava, when you said that, was like, sometimes when people audition, especially since we're talking about commercials, the commercial is funny, so like you don't have to be that funny. You got to play it really straight. And then sometimes they're looking for a funny person to fill this role. Like, we know this writing's not great, make it funnier. And so it's funny what you just did, because it felt like that situation with the ventriloquist and stuff is funny, but then what you just said is funny. So it's kind of like the double hit, which is great.
Yeah.
But usually it's kind of one or the other, in a sense, where they're like, okay, and it can be both, but it's just like that idea of like, okay, if the situation's funny, try to play it straight. And sometimes, but they want to see, what are you bringing to it, personally, right?
For sure. And there's also, this is not my line, this is from an acting class I used to take, but Abbott and Costello, like, you always, when you have two people in a scene, somebody's got to be high, somebody's got to be low. So if the other person is high energy, you got to bring low energy. If someone is supposed to be the wacky character, then you automatically have to play the straighter character. So you always have to have that balance. And so I do think that, sort of to what you're saying, is like, yeah, sometimes you need to kind of be able to figure out what your role is in a scene, and where you need to be bringing more, where you don't. I do definitely think when it's like a scripted scene in a commercial, you always need to be bringing improv. Like, you always need to be bringing your best material, your best writing material, because they want to see that you can keep this character going past what they've written, and that you can really embody this character and still make it funny, even if they don't. I think it was actually my very first commercial that I booked in LA. It was for AT&T, and it was where we were at this like communal seating thing, and I was the girl on the phone, and so I'm just having these like conversations, and everyone at the communal desk is like looking at me and having these like dirty looks, and I'm just oblivious to everything. And we shot my stuff first, and I just have to keep talking. Like, that's my job, so that like they can film everyone else's reactions. And it was like every single time we cut, it was like, okay, new story, new characters, new things that you're talking about, new reactions that you're having on the phone. And they would start, because I was bringing something new all the time, then the director and the writers that were there would start like coming to me and being like, maybe on the next take, do this. Oh, next take, do this. And then it becomes like a collaboration again. But you have to be bringing that stuff. And it got to the point where it was like 4 hours in, where I'm just like, they'd call cut, okay, reset. And I'm just on my brain's like, what now? Okay. Pins. Okay. Mr. Peterson, you want pins? You want like, and I'm just like, I like everything I can grab. I'm just like trying to pull into the new storyline. And that is that like thing with improv of like, you've got to keep pulling more. Like, you've got to keep making sure you've got something to bring to this character.
Did you ever go back to hamburger? Because that's so good. I know that was later, Ava, but you could have pulled that out just every take. That would have killed it for me.
Okay.
That's my new bit. I love that. So I love that. Ava, so you just talked about your first commercial. What do you think changed for you when you kind of started booking commercials and stuff like that? Was it a mindset? Was it a skill set? Was it being in the room a lot, demystifying it? What do you think changed for you?
Um, I do think being in the room a lot helped because it did make it less scary.
Mm-hmm.
So these were my rooms. Like I work in them every day, 8 hours a day. Like I'm not afraid of being in that room. I'm not afraid of being with those people. It, you, I wish every actor had the opportunity to actually sit in those rooms and realize, with the clients, they don't know what they're talking about most of the time. They don't like as nice as they are, but they didn't go to theater school. Like they don't know anything about what it takes to be an actor. They're looking at it from their perspective. And a lot of times they're, getting hounded by their bosses about what they need to do. Like, so they can be judgy, but realizing that they don't really know what, like they don't come with any kind of authority in that sense. So kind of to take that pressure off of like, don't worry about what they have to say. You bring your A game and that's all you can do. But also when you see actor after actor after actor realizing that it's like some of them are great and have bad days. Some of them are not great, but have amazing days because this part is just perfect for them. And you start to realize that it's not all on you, I guess. I remember having this thought out in the waiting room once. I think it was for a callback, and seeing like, I don't know, 5 or 6 other women going in for the same part as me. And just having that realization that at the end of the day, only one of these girls is going to book this. But somehow if you're the one who doesn't book it, you have this weird mindset that everyone else did. And like, you're the only one who didn't. But it was just like realizing that actually of the 7 of us here, 6 of us aren't going to book it. We're all going to go home and be disappointed, and realizing, I don't know, somehow that it like wasn't all on my shoulders, that it's like, no, it's up for everybody. And sometimes she's going to book it and sometimes she's going to book it and sometimes I'm going to book it. And that change, like that kind of mindset change helps me not so much not take it seriously, but not take it as personally, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it's you start to think it's a negative way of thinking, just being like, I'm the only one who's not good enough. And it's like, it's truly not true. Like there's so many people. It's amazing you got to 7, Yeah,
exactly. And also, this sounds kind of terrible in a sense, but it's like, no one cares about you as much as you do. Like no one's paying as much attention to you as you do. I know there's so many times where I've gone in for an audition and wanted to talk to the session director because I know them afterward and be like, how did I do? What did they say? What is it like? Meh. And realizing that on the flip side, when I've been the session director and I've had an actor come in that I know who's also a session director or whatever, it's like they were great or they were okay or whatever. And then we kind of forgot about them. Like it's not like we spent the rest of the time talking about like, remember when Dave came in and he did that thing? It's like, no one's thinking that much about you. So go in, do your thing, and then let it go.
Yeah, it is crazy, that idea, Ava. I know exactly what you're talking about. When I go in, like, do a callback and I know the session director, and then I leave and I'm like, oh, it went pretty well. Like, I really want to text them, but it's like, like you just kind of, after a while, you kind of let go of that, or, usually you do, because you're just like, you know what, it's going to kind of fall where it is. And even, if it's someone who's your champion in there, they're going to be your champion and it's still going to kind of go where it goes. But that it is kind of that letting go. I mean, it's also interesting because our profession is about feeling, it's about emotion, it's about like being aware, and then we have to kind of shut that down or turn that off. And I think that's an interesting, right? Like I think about that, like when I did this play recently where, I like to be aware of everything that's going on, all these things. But then like if the audience is being really loud, you have to like ignore that. So you're trying to be aware of what your actors are doing. You're trying to like catch every detail, but then there's some stuff you're like totally filtering out. And Ava, I'm curious for you. One of the things I have, and I've mentioned this before, is because I've run so many castings, when I go into a casting room, I'm almost like too aware of like what they're doing behind the camera. It's hard for me to turn that off because I like see the director like pointing and I'm like, oh, he's probably pointing to like zoom in on one person, which, we always do silently not always, but we'll do behind the camera where they're like, just that person. And you're zooming in and you're like, wait, are they zooming in on? Like I'm so aware of the sounds of the computer and all those things. Do you have that? Or are you able to like turn that part of your brain off?
I always call it the actor brain and the character brain. So like I do try as much as possible to sort of turn that actor brain off. I find yeah, a little bit. Like I had a really amazing callback once where I was in the room for 45 minutes. Like it was insane. And it was this like Telly Savalas, like I had to do this like Telly Savalas impression. So it was like a very bizarro kind of thing. And the director kept being like, mark that one. Mark that one. And I kept like looking over at the session director, and he was like on his phone the whole time. And I just remember him just being like, dude, like come on. Like look alive, come on now. And like, and just like starting to think that like, I was like, I would not be behaving like this. Like, and that did kind of start to throw my attention of like, I know how you should be behaving right now. And this is not it. You should be paying more attention to what's going on. So there is that stuff, but I tend to honestly pay more attention to, if it's a callback, say, pay more attention to the clients in the room and their reaction. And my thing is like, I know that a lot of times they're busy doing other work. So I'm not offended if they don't look up or they don't give me a reaction. But my goal is to make them laugh or to like get some sort of reaction out of them, that they are starting to pay attention, that I've done something that has piqued their attention or their energy.
Yeah.
So I try and focus more on that and less on the technical of like, I trust if John is running the camera, he's doing it properly.
Nah, who knows what's going on?
He's not.
I've got Chrome up. I've got a lot of tabs up. If there's basketball, I'm probably watching basketball, you know? A couple just like questions I also are things to chat about. One is, you mentioned this earlier. Why do you think there's so few women session directors?
Real answer, because they make more money than the lobby assistants. I feel like you follow the money. If they don't make as much money, it's usually a woman doing the job. If they make more money, it's usually a guy. But having said that, I think it started as more of a technical job. I think it started as a camera op job, and then there was a session director, and then it got morphed into doing both of the things together. And so I think there's always been a stigma of that men are more technical. They can operate the cameras. Women are going to be more administrative. So they'll do the lobby assistant stuff and that kind of thing. And so I think that's just out there. So they spend more time on it. They learn it. And that has sort of morphed into then camera operating. I think having the session director part kind of in a sense did open it up more to women, because that is a skill that is a little bit more, goes both ways. That's a more of a thinking, cerebral, how do I communicate to you, less having a technical skill set, if that makes sense. So maybe that's what kind of helped, bridge the gap. But I do think that's kind of where it comes from, is that it was more of a technical thing. But the women that I know that are session directors are all very tech savvy. And it's like in this day and age, and especially in LA, so much of it was on computer. And we had like tech guys that like their whole job was there to like take care of if issues that came up. When I first moved here and I was like, this is it, this is all I have to do. This is amazing. This used to like all be my responsibility. And like, if something went down with like the audio equipment, like I had to figure out like what wires to replace and do. So, so I think that's always been where it is it's the technical stigma.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. I think it just to clarify for people. Yeah. So what it used to be, and Corbin, maybe you know this, but at least for commercials, you had what was like the camera operator who was behind the camera. And then you had someone in the room who was like kind of like the session director or the person who's kind of directing the actor. So they had separated those, and then kind of over time, those came together. And sometimes it was like the casting director, but then when they had multiple jobs, they couldn't be in multiple rooms. So that would be someone else. And so those kind of became one position, which is what Ava's talking about. And it is interesting. I remember I always kind of think of session directors in like generations. And there was a guy who was the generation above me. And I don't know if I called him or someone else like called him a camera operator. He's like, I'm not a camera operator, I'm a session director. And, because camera operators at the time, were kind of lumped in with like button pushers in a sense. And then session director means you're directing, which I always thought was like, oh, that's really kind of interesting. Just the, what he attached to those.
Yeah.
And do you see a difference? I know you say you're not doing it as much, but for TV or film auditions, I know you've done some film and stuff like that. How do you apply like commercial skills to that or not? Or how do you separate those two for people?
I found that, and I think this is one of the reasons why I don't really do it as much. I found there was less opportunity to play in film and TV auditions. You get a lot more of sort of come in, do it and get out. And if we like you, we'll slate you at the end. Or like, this is I just remember like getting scripts and having questions and like they wouldn't answer them. Like I remember what was that? Like the horror show that like was on for a bunch of seasons.
Oh, American Horror Story?
American Horror Story. Yeah. And it was this like audition for like, you're sitting on this bench and you're screaming. Okay. Like what kind of scream? Like what's going on? Like, give me some backstory. We can't tell you any of that.
Cool.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give a completely different, and then you scream and they're like, okay, thank you very much. And you're like, okay. Whereas like, that's what I love about like commercials is you have a session director. Whereas like a lot of times in film and TV, you have the casting director, you have like someone who maybe doesn't really like, they don't necessarily give you that time. Sometimes they do. And those were always really fun, but a lot of times they don't. Whereas that's what I love with session directing is like, you get to create this and it's like, okay, this is what's going on. And this is what we need to see. And then we need to do this, and this, and this. And if you're like, okay, but why am I screaming? Well, because this happened and this happened. And like, you get that more inclusion and you get to really like play. And that's what I've kind of missed in film and TV auditions.
I never thought about that. It's funny. I think a lot of people think it's the opposite. So it's really interesting you say that, Ava, because I think you're right. There is a kind of a, don't do any improv, stick to this, stay in this world. And then, in commercials, there is more of that freedom, which is really interesting. I kind of never thought about that, but I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. For me, it got to the point where I'd get a film or TV audition. I'd be like, oh, okay, I have to go home and I have to like learn these lines and I have to like make these choices and, and I won't get any of that feedback. And when I get a commercial audition, I'd be like, oh, yay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I get to go in and play. And like, sometimes you wouldn't even get the script and you just get the script when you arrive and you're just like reading it frantically and being like, okay. And that's my line. And you've got your lines posted on the board. So if you forget them, you can just like look over there and grab it real quick. And it just felt like there was more opportunity to just sort of be in the moment with it. And that's where I say like with improv, sometimes being a really great improviser on stage doesn't always necessarily translate, because I think the improv in commercials a lot of times isn't so much about necessarily being funny. It's about being real and how you can sort of be in the moment and sort of go with the flow of whatever comes and whatever happens and be willing to sort of play in that and maybe throw a button on. And sometimes it's not even a verbal button. Sometimes it's just a look or it's just something nonverbal. And I think that's like, those are the qualities that you get out of being a good improviser that you get to translate into commercials. Whereas sometimes I find people who are amazing improvisers and I've seen them on stage or I've seen them direct sketch shows or whatever. And I'm like, you're so good. And then they come in and they try too hard and they try and like rewrite the entire scene, or they can't get out of like their idea of what is funny. And they're trying so hard to be funny, but they're not bringing truth to the character. And that's where it's like, for me, that's what improv means in commercials, is that you're funny. You understand what comedy is. You understand what the comedy beats are, but you can just also just be free in the moment to just kind of go wherever the scene's going to go.
One of like a fun, like a audition is, or it for a commercial, like it's fun, but it's really challenging. It's like, they're like a car drives by with your family and you have to like give a look, but exactly as you're saying, you can't really like put too much of a spin on that. You don't want to like kind of milk it to the point where it's this funny joke, but like finding that specific, the specifics, like this is like, who is in that car? What kind of car? Is it my favorite kind of car? Or do I not like it? And I really like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think when it comes especially to the commercial auditions that have no dialogue, less is more. Because we're typically then in a lot tighter on your face. It's all about just that very subtle look. Whereas if it's like a scripted scene, then you can pepper in more dialogue and you can throw like a verbal button on and stuff like that. So I think it's also understanding what type of commercial you're coming in for and what kind of, this is stuff I've talked about with students before, but it's like, what tools do you need for each different type of audition, because they are different. And sometimes people think that like, oh, they need to be bringing buttons all the time. They need to be bringing like this stuff. And sometimes if it's just you driving in a car and someone going past, it's a nonverbal reaction is going to be way funnier than you trying to talk for 5 minutes and create all these jokes.
You're not going to do a thing. Yeah.
Well, exactly. I was just thinking I had an audition that a commercial that I recently did where I was an astronaut, Ava, and the audition, they did something that they didn't even do in the spot, but it was like an astronaut like watching, like looking at Earth or seeing the sunrise or something like that. But it's like one of those that you're talking about where it's like, you really don't do much. It was a self-tape. And I was just like, I've done so many of those where it's like, you really want to show you're looking at the sun, right? And so then you're like, oh, it's amazing. And it was like, no, don't, just watch it, have the thought and let it be. And it's like one of those things where your acting instinct really kicks in. And it's like, no, you just kind of, even, after seeing it a bunch, it still pops up where you're like, I really want to throw something in there of mine. It's like, oh no, just keep it, keep it grounded. Let me ask you, do you have any advice? I think one of the most difficult auditions are spokesmen or women auditions. Those are really challenging because you're doing it a lot of times right to camera. It's a lot of dialogue. Sometimes it's like dialogue that's like medical jargon and they're like, make it natural. It's like, I never say polypropylene in my daily life. I don't know. Do you have any advice for spokesperson roles?
Yes, I will say first though, I actually think those are the easier ones. And I think the more difficult ones are the nonverbal and the improv ones.
God, because Ava are so contrarian. I love it. All these things. This is good. This is like,
because I think most people do think it's like the more dialogue, the more difficult. But I actually think that thought process is what messes people up sometimes. And it's actually because they're wanting so badly to have the crutch of dialogue, is people have a really hard time with scenes where there's nothing to say and you just have to be in the moment, or improvise scenes where you're just making everything up. But at the end of the day, they're not going to keep any of that dialogue. And so people are trying so hard to create scenes and relationships and say funny things, but they forget that it's actually about their physical body. And that's what we need to see in the end. And so they just become talking heads. So I will first say that I actually think people have more trouble with those, but 100% spokesperson dialogue to camera kind of scenes really throw people for a loop. And the first thing I would say is you need to be very specific about who you're talking to. And I also say where you're talking to them, because understanding, and no one needs to know. In the commercial, you could be in a white void, but if you say you're in your kitchen talking to your sister, you're going to talk to her very differently than even if you're in her kitchen. And which sister? Is it your older sister? Is it your younger sister? Like being very, very specific about that will completely already change how you deliver the lines. Because now you're talking to a real person, you're going to put emphasis on different things based on who you're talking to. But I think the most important thing is to breathe and talk like a human being. And I think that's where people really mess up, because they get into this thing where they're like looking at the camera and they have to keep talking and they've memorized these words. And sometimes they're too afraid to even look at the board, because then they will like mess up where they're going. And all of a sudden they realize like, oh my God, I'm talking too much and I'm not breathing and I don't know what my next word is. And then you see the wheels coming off in their eyes as they're trying to like keep it going. And it's like, we don't talk like that as human beings. Right. We don't look in one place and never look away. As we think about our thought, we look away and then we come back. And it's like, utilize that. Like actually, the more you behave like a real person and a human being, the better. And so it's actually easier to go to the board as like a thought and taking a breath, and then, oh, a new thought popped into your head. And that is the impetus for the next part of what you're going to say. But you got a chance to like find it on the board, and utilizing that kind of motion and breathing and looking away and coming back and having a real conversation. All of a sudden you're you're like a real person telling us about something as opposed to a robot just looking into camera. And I find people who do that and can just kind of like settle into that and really know what you're saying. When we as session runners, I'm sure, John, you've been in that too. You're getting 50 people coming in doing exactly the same copy, the exact same way, and you start tuning it out because you've already heard it 1,000 times. But someone who comes in and truly knows what they're saying, you all of a sudden start hearing it. You start listening to it. And so that's another thing of just like genuinely knowing what you're saying and why, and then just delivering it like a human being.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I think that's great. And I think it kind of reminds me of that idea of like, you know, in a certain sense, anyone can kind of memorize a monologue, but our job is to kind of breathe the life into it and bring it off the page, you know, and it's a similar thing to that, where even if we want to make it so people are understanding it or hearing it, and it's not exactly just kind of feeling like memorized jargon. Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is like, yeah, okay, we don't usually use these medical terms in real life, but then put yourself in a situation where you would be needing to use these medical terms in real life, or, you know, or there's the, you know, the acting exercise of like, you're saying gibberish, but you've got an intention behind it. And so it's words like, you know, make sure you have an intention, make sure you have a relationship with who you're talking to so that it makes sense of why you're sharing this information. And so, yeah, you might say this, like this big fancy medical word, but what does it mean in terms of what you're saying to this person?
I got a question. You talking about making it someone you know. I've been using ex-girlfriends a lot, and it makes a lot of my copy angry. Ava, should I change who I'm using as my substitution? I'm very angry in the audition.
No,
keep it like that.
Always go in with anger in commercials. That is always the right choice.
I can use my father, but I'm angry at him too right now. So there's nobody left.
No, I always say like commercials, like nothing is ever so bad that anyone is getting divorced or dying over. Like everything has to have a lightness. Everything has to have a warmth to it. So yeah, if it makes you angry, don't change who you're talking to.
Yes. I think that is a very, one time I was asking personality questions, and I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole, but there was 3 people in the room, and the first guy, it was like, my question was, what's something you found out over email? And he's like, that I was getting divorced. I swear to God. And I don't think it was a joke. And the energy left the room. There was, and then the people after that, like, it was like, cause he wasn't really joking. He looked kind of depressed, and it was just like, boom. And then the energy I was like, oh, that group just pooped the bed, as we say. But yeah, so yeah, definitely don't keep it. And that's what people say. Is it smiley? I'm like, it's not smiley, but it's positive. It doesn't have to be smiley, but it's like positive. You know?
You on your best day.
Yeah, you on your best day.
You on your best day. Still you, just you on a really good day. I had this audition, this is years ago in Toronto. It was like for McDonald's or something. And it was like a couple, and you're just sitting there eating, and you're just like chatting about your day. And I was clearly in a bad relationship because the whole thing became me being like, you need to make sure you do this, and you need to do this. And like, can you please? And I was like nagging, and we finished the scene. And even the session director was like, wow, that was a lot.
You know, acting is not therapy, but it can be therapeutic. Yes. You know what I mean? So that was Ava working it out.
Working it out and realizing, maybe this is something I need to deal with.
I love that. Yeah. Well, Ava, I want to get to our one of our favorite sections, which is called Your Best Bad Acting. And what we're going to do, I know this is exciting. We're going to send you a quote, and you get to read it however you want. But have fun with it. The point is to go over the top, and we might give you a redirect. We might not. Corbin, what's this from again? Just so she has a reference.
It's from Parks and Rec. It's April Ludgate.
Okay, so this is from Parks and Rec. But you don't. You just do it however you want. Yeah. You want, and whenever you're ready.
Okay. Listen. Time is money. Money is power. Power is pizza, and pizza is knowledge. Okay, ready? Let's go. That was me bringing anger.
I loved it. Yes. Yeah, you're chilling. You're thinking about my dad or my ex-girlfriends. Okay, now, I mean, I know it's too obvious, but we got to see Swedish.
Yes.
We have to see Swedish. I mean, that was just like, I knew right Corbin was going to say it before me, but let's do Swedish.
Okay, I'll try my best. Time is money. Money is power. Power is pizza. Pizza is knowledge. Let's go.
I love this character so much.
Ava, I can watch you do that for hours. That needs to be a go-to.
I have played a couple of different Swedish characters.
I can tell.
It's really good.
I can tell. It's just like I can't do the accent, but the guy from Frozen, which my son has watched, the Norwegian guy, you know, he's got that great you got it. I love that. I don't know.
So
Corbin,
good.
did you have another redirect? I
I'm going way left here, but I kind of want to see this person stoned. I want to see what it was like, just like.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah.
Time is like money, you know, and money is power. Power is pizza, and pizza is like knowledge. Yeah, let's go, man.
Yes.
Yes. Actually, I think that fits the best, Corbin. That was good.
That was fun. That was fun. Yeah.
Fits really, really well. Well, Ava, this has been wonderful. I was like texting Corbin, should we just go 2 hours? He's like, no, we're on a schedule. But
time is money. Money is power.
Money is power. And we don't have pizza, so we're
Power
done.
is pizza.
Ava, you are amazing, and you know any actor that gets to walk into a room where you're running the session, you know, I know they're in good hands. You are definitely one of the best session directors in town, and that's super exciting. And I know,
That's so sweet.
no,
I've made it.
You've made it. She's made it again. Now that it's on a podcast, it's true. And Ava, I know 2 things. One, if people want to like follow you, can they find you somewhere? And like, are you teaching? I know you've taught in the past. Are you have anything coming up just so they can keep an eye out for if it's not happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go to my website, which is avahimmel.com. And that's kind of where I put everything, my acting stuff, my directing stuff, my coaching. I do privates and different types of coaching sessions right now. When I have time again, I'll start doing, I have like a 6-week course that I do, which is really like in depth into everything you need to know about commercials. But I've had stuff going on, guys. I've been getting married. I've been doing stuff.
Yes.
So I haven't had really time to put towards that. But that's where I'll kind of post when I've got like a new class or something. I'll put it there. So best place. And that and Instagram, I guess. At Ava Himmel. At Ava Himmel.
At Ava Himmel. Well, go find Ava. She's amazing. She's awesome. Good person to have in your network of web of people that are great people that are doing really good work. Well, Ava, we wish you all the success. This was really wonderful.
Thank you. I wish you guys all the success. Thank you for doing this. I honestly think it's so great that these things like podcasts and all this kind of stuff is now available, because I think back to like when I started, John, I'm sure when you started, and you're sort of a little lost of like, where do I even begin? What do I even do? So it's so nice to be able to have platforms like this. So I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, people are curious. They can just you can get so much no matter where you are, which is also the exciting part. You know what I mean? I think that's a really neat thing you can learn from. Awesome. Well, Ava, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Of course, congrats on getting married, and good luck with everything else. Of course.
That little plug as well.
Exactly. All right. Awesome. Bye, Ava.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Moving Spotlight podcast. Corbin, what are we plugging this week?
We're plugging our Instagram at the Moving Spotlight, and just follow us on YouTube, follow us on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Do all the things. We need it.
Yes, and I'm getting privately paid by Athletic Greens. They pay me and Tim Ferriss.
Cha-ching,
cha-ching.
Money.
Not getting paid by them. Check us out on Instagram and check us out on our next episode. See you then.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the
Moving Spotlight Podcast.